Enterprise's evil Vulcans secretly followed Star Trek. TNG's Klingon Retcon. Evil Vulcans became the enemy in Star Trek. Enterprise, just as corrupt Klingons were often the enemies in Star Trek: The Next Generation. The Vulcans and Klingons both made their debut on Star Trek, the original series, which established many elements about their species. However, with the episodic nature of 1960s television, TOS did not spend much time developing complex cultural histories for the alien species it introduced. TOS would reveal hints about the Vulcans when it pertained to a specific storyline involving Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and the Klingons served as general enemies for Captain James T. Kirk, William Shatner to oppose. Initially, John Roddenberry wanted Star Trek: The Next Generation to steer away from aliens like Vulcans and Klingons to differentiate itself from Star Trek, the original series. For example, Roddenberry did not want T. Worf, Michael Dorn, to be a main character, but the Klingon nevertheless proved popular with fans. Most of Worf's stories throughout TNG dealt with his complex relationship with the Klingon Empire. TNG revealed more about Klingon politics and their way of life than TOS ever had, exposing the many corrupt politicians in the Klingon High Council. Star Trek: Enterprise followed suit with 22nd century Vulcans. Enterprise's Vulcans followed Star Trek: TNG's corrupt Klingons. A prequel to Star Trek, original series, Star Trek: Enterprise depicted the events leading up to the founding of the United Federation of Planets in the 22nd century. 100 years after the Vulcans' first contact with humanity, many Vulcans felt that Earth was not ready to explore the galaxy. Although Vulcans and United Earth remained cooperative, some Vulcans sought to sabotage the relationship between the two planets for their own ends. Several of the Vulcans at the highest levels of power in Enterprise turned out to be corrupt, just as many Klingons did in Star Trek: The Next Generation. In Star Trek: Enterprise Season 4, Captain Jonathan Archer, Scott Bakula, helped uncover a Romulan plot to conquer Vulcan and reunite the Romulan and Vulcan people by force. This corruption went all the way to the head of the Vulcan High Council, Administrator Vloz, Robert Foxworth, who was working with an undercover Romulan operative named Major Talek Todd Stashwick. In service of the Romulans' goals, Vloz bombed the United Earth Embassy on Vulcan, blaming the Cyrenites, and ordered an attack on Andoria. In the end, Archer, T'Pol, Jolene Blalock, and Spau, Kara Zediker, helped thwart the Romulans' plans to destabilize the Alpha Quadrant. T'Pol dealt with evil Vulcans like Worf's history with evil Klingons. Despite being raised by humans, Worf held on to his Klingon heritage and ultimately came to embody Klingon honor better than many of his people. He was dismayed to learn about the corruption in the Klingon High Council and spent years trying to root it out. Similarly, Sub-Commander T'Pol regularly butted heads with Vulcans who did not have Starfleet's best interest in mind. When the Enterprise launched a mission to search for the Xindi after they attacked Earth, T'Pol was ordered to return to Vulcan. T'Pol chose to defy her superiors and remain on the Enterprise, just as Worf accepted a discommendation to remain on the USS Enterprise D. T'Pol ultimately helped uncover the Romulan conspiracy that had infected the Vulcan High Command and helped usher in a new era for the Vulcan people as they embraced the true teachings of Surik. While Worf and T'Pol's situations were not exact parallels, they were both the only members of their species on ships full of, mostly, humans. They both had to come to terms with the fact that their people were not as above reproach as they once believed. On Star Trek: Enterprise and Star. In the Star Trek universe, the Vulcans are often portrayed as a logical, peaceful race devoted to reason and scientific exploration. However, Star Trek: Enterprise dared to delve into the darker side of Vulcan society, showing a more secretive, morally ambiguous version of these iconic characters. This exploration of the evil Vulcans subtly mirrored Star Trek: The Next Generation's TNG reinterpretation of Klingons, showcasing a retcon in storytelling that redefined the species' cultural depth and political intrigue. TNG's Klingon Retcon, a foundation of complexity. To understand the connection, it's essential to revisit TNG's approach to the Klingons. When they first appeared in Star Trek, the original series, TOS, the Klingons were depicted as warlike and untrustworthy antagonists, often serving as a simple foil to the Federation. They were one-dimensional villains defined by aggression and hostility. TNG, however, reimagined the Klingons as a rich and layered culture. Rather than painting them as purely antagonistic, the show introduced honor and tradition as core tenets of Klingon society. Through characters like Worf, TNG explored the struggles of identity, loyalty, and the cultural tensions within the Klingon Empire itself. Episodes like Sins of the Father and Redemption expanded on their political intrigues, factionalism, and the inner workings of their honor-based society. This retcon added depth, allowing the Klingons to become far more than mere antagonists. They became a mirror to humanity's struggles with tradition and progress. Enterprise's Vulcans, from benevolent allies to shadowy puppeteers. In Star Trek, Enterprise, a similar transformation occurred with the Vulcans. Previously, the Vulcans had been portrayed as almost idealized allies of humanity. They were Spock's people, the epitome of reason and virtue. But Enterprise challenged this perception by presenting Vulcan society as far more complex and flawed than fans had been led to believe. Early in the series, the Vulcans are shown as manipulative overseers of humanity's early space exploration efforts. Instead of fully supporting Earth's ambition to expand into the stars, they deliberately hinder human progress, claiming it's for humanity's own good. Their interference often puts them at odds with Captain Archer and the crew of the Enterprise. For instance, they delay the development of Earth's warp technology and scrutinize human decisions with a condescending air. Episodes like the Andorian incident further expose the darker side of Vulcan society. The Vulcans are revealed to have secret intelligence operations and to be spying on their Andorian neighbors, despite claiming to adhere to strict ethical principles. This morally dubious behavior paints a stark contrast to their image as paragons of logic and ethics. The Kershara arc in Season 4 deepens this exploration. It uncovers internal corruption within the Vulcan High Command, revealing a faction of Vulcans who have strayed far from the teachings of Surik, the founder of Vulcan logic. These Vulcans prioritize power and control over the ideals of peace and rationality. By the end of the arc, a cultural reformation begins, aligning Vulcan society more closely with the enlightened ideals seen in later series like TOS and TNG. This arc parallels the cultural evolution of the Klingons in TNG, where internal strife and reformation become key themes. Parallels between the retcons. The retconning of both the Klingons and the Vulcans serves a similar purpose, to add depth and nuance to species that had been oversimplified in earlier portrayals. Both changes reveal internal divisions and complexities that challenge the surface-level perceptions of these cultures. In TNG, the Klingons are not monolithic warriors, but a society rife with political intrigue, differing interpretations of honor, and power struggles. Similarly, in Enterprise, the Vulcans are no longer purely altruistic and logical beings, but a society grappling with corruption, internal conflict, and the misapplication of their own principles. Both retcons also explore the idea of cultural evolution. The Klingons in TNG evolve from the scheming villains of TOS to a society that values honor and tradition while still struggling with its darker impulses. Likewise, the Vulcans of Enterprise transition from a secretive and manipulative power to a more enlightened civilization by the series' end. Why these retcons matter? These reinterpretations reflect the broader storytelling goals of the Star Trek franchise, to examine the complexities of identity, culture, and morality. By complicating the narratives around the Klingons and Vulcans, the writers not only made these species more compelling, but